guest is someone who doesn't challenge the way we think. He challenges the way we frame our thinking in the first place. Charles Cottom is author of Notes from Outside the Box. Charles, thanks so much for being with us today. It's a pleasure to have you.
A pleasure to be here, sir.
And perhaps to kick us off, what inspired you to write Notes from Outside the Box?
Well, I retired in 1968, disabled, and I'd been writing essays out my whole life about epiphanies and things I understood. And I had a conflict going between the science fiction I was reading and my Christian upbringing as a Roman Catholic. And there was a divergence there because I go and read about these civilizations that had alternate belief systems, and I would have to integrate them with my basic Christian beliefs, and so I'd have these epiphanies throughout my life, and I'd write them down. And so when I finally retired, I says, I could write all those things up and publish them. And this was right when self-publishing was starting. So I said, I wouldn't even have to go to a traditional publisher. And so 11 years later, I haven't sold any books because it's too over the top, too complex for people to really relate to. And I've had a lot of promoters say they're going to do it, and they haven't succeeded. So I'm hoping these podcasts with you will help open that door for me.
Well, it certainly sounds like an intriguing concept to me. What exactly does outside the box mean to you, and what could it mean to our readers?
Well, people are stuck in their national identity, their religious identity, their social identity, their economic identity, and so there's this great diversity of conflict between all these belief systems. Now, when I traveled around the world, I was in the service and I traveled through Korea. I took my mom when she was 88 years old to Europe, and 80% of the people I met were just wonderful people. I could just relate to them, and they relate to me on a one-to-one level. And so that was one of my major epiphanies. I realized that 80% of humanity, at the bare minimum, 80% of humanity is like that. And so when I read the media and read the context of stuff, you just hear all this garbage about trauma and disaster and conflict and everything else, and that's just not the way the people are. They're the victims of the people pushing that kind of information. So that's why I wrote the book. I said, here's a way to look at it that I see there. One example I can give you is when I was stationed in Korea, I was traveling into the backcountry where they didn't even recognize Americans because GIs were kind of crude by their standards. Their civilization is 25 years old, and ours is 250 years old. So they were really crude and barbaric by Korean standards, and here's these people were working in rice paddies with recycling their excreta and eating the food and making the rice reeds into the roofs. These houses had been there; they're mud wattle houses, and people going looking. That's disgusting. Those are terrible. I was invited inside those houses. They had black lacquer, golden glazed furniture in there. Linoleum floors, a heating block under the floor that kept the place warm during the cold, freezing winter. The civilization was 2,500 years old. They'd been living like that successfully for 2,500 years old. So I was walking down the streets in Gyeongju. It's now changed to Gongju. Happened to be a Sunday. I didn't even know that. There was a whole bunch of Korean people going to a Buddhist church. And they were looking at me and just inviting me by their bodies to come and join their thing. And I almost went. And the reason I didn't, because I was dressed in my shabby travel clothes. And I didn't want to impose that mentality on them. And so I've always regretted that, because I should have done that just to open the doors to a foreign person. But I was too tied up in my own content to say that I couldn't do that, but I should have, and I always, that's one of the things in my life I'll remember it forever, it was just one of the times I didn't. And so,
Interesting.
yeah.
And it does seem like in today's world, we're all running so quickly. We're also focused on our own existence, our own perception of what the world is. And we sometimes forget that it's a big world out there beyond where we grew up or the street that we
Yeah.
live on.
Well, think about China. We're sitting there locking horns with China. That's a civilization is 5,000 years old. They've been living like that. That didn't matter who was ruling, Kublai Khan or whoever. It wasn't who was ruling. It wasn't what dynasty was in effect. Just like in Europe, the Europeans lived with the royalties. My family, Cottom, were caregivers of one of the palaces in England back in the 1700s when England closed down the palaces because they didn't want to afford them anymore, and so they didn't need the caregivers, and so my whole family was sent down and put on ships and sent to America. And that's where I came.
Wow.
I'm a Cottom. I came from, and they didn't speak English very good. It was English, but they didn't understand, so they'd say Cottom. Where are you from? Cottom. But that was the people were asking for their name, and they were to tell them where they were from. So that's my name. It came for Cottom. So you sit there and look at Cottom. It's Chattom, CH. There are all kinds of spellings for the people that left that mansion. You know, and so when you carry over that ideology to some ancient country like China or something, you're looking at the way it's been forever until the overtake. It was a European civilization. That's why Marco Polo was successful, why the trade, why Hong Kong happened. All that history happened because it was dynastic, just like the English. Dutch, everything were dynastic. That was the way it was then. And so they were the elites that were doing the traveling. It was the merchants, the raising middle class that opened the doors to all that stuff. Now we're fighting the same, but even those communists in China are different than the communists in Russia. See, they're very different. In Eastern Russia, you have a lot of similarity because civilizations are the same. But the European side, or Russia, is different. I mean, it's a whole different world, and that's where the communism started. And it drifted
Interesting.
across Russia and then went down into China, and so they drifted over. But the dynastic thing is still the basis of the country, and that's where a lot of their problems are now. They're trying to equalize everybody, and the people. I'm a rice planter. What are you going to
Right.
do with it? So that's where the dichotomy is. It's between the structures of organization, the international organizations, versus the everyday people. Everyday people, when I traveled through Europe with my mom, we didn't go to the resorts. We stayed in hotels and places like that. You just meet the regular people. We didn't stay with the rich people, even though we were Americans. We were the Americans that didn't stay with the rich people, and
Hmm.
it opened all
Hmm.
kinds of doors. It just opened up. We were on a taxi. We'd taken a ride down to a town on a train that was from the movies. I don't remember now, but it was one of the trains there. We took it down there, and when we got done eating, they were really slow in service and everything else, but when we got done eating, we went back to the train station to ride back to where we were staying, and the train had left already, and they waited for us to stay there. There was a bunch of taxi cab drivers waiting there, so I just went up and talked to the taxi cab drivers. We got to go back to Glasgow. Is there any problem? And oh no, I can take you back there. But everybody could see the whole town. There was grouping their way to see where we were going to spend the night. They'd arranged it so we would miss the train, so we'd have to spend a night, take the train the next day, you know? And I didn't
Ah,
realize that till later. But when I took the cab driver down there, and when he dropped us off at the place, a 2-hour drive, it wasn't that long. You're not supposed to tip. And so I gave him money because it was late at night. It was dark by the time I got there and everything. He says, "Oh, we don't accept tips." I said, "This isn't for you. This is for your wife that's got your hot meal prepared for you at home." And his face just melted into pleasure of accepting that money because of the way I
yep.
versed it. You couldn't accept it as a tourist, but I was not a tourist. I was connecting to his family, and there's many experiences like that. Many experiences. I mean, when you sit there and do that, that's the concept. I carried that because it was my history, starting from science fiction Christian, that opened the doors to all these differences in an accepting way. And that's what I wanted to share in the book. I wanted to say there's a way to look at civilization outside the box. We are not communists. We are not English. We are not this. We're not that. We are people.
We're all people.
We're all let's look at us from outside the box. What holds us together? What do we have unique? How come I can communicate to these people and share these experiences in a positive way? And that's what the book's about. How to look at life in a positive way. The
Wonderful.
introduction of books is there are no mistakes. God makes no mistakes. Whatever we experience is the perfect consequence of the decisions we make individually and collectively. So when you said when something bad happens to me, I can accept it because that happened because of a decision I made.
Gotcha. So one of your main messages, Charles, would be have an open mind. Would
Y-
that be a key message that
Yes,
you would ask
that's an
readers
open.
to take away?
Acknowledge that you have an open mind. I think it's more important. A lot of people act on having an open mind, and they do a very good job at it, but they don't realize what a powerful thing that is and what a unifying thing that is. See, that's the
Charles, would you say that most of us, 90% of us, 99% of us live inside the box, meaning we live in our world and we're too busy to look outside the box or to care about others? Is that part of what the message is?
For sure, and, there's a lot of people that go around like the Doctors Without Borders and missionaries, and you see a whole lot of groups going over in Africa and, the Far East and stuff like that, building the ancient communities. I've seen the shows on podcasts and stuff about 'em building water systems where people used to have to carry 5-gallon buckets from a half a mile to get the water to the house, and now they've got a little station right there that, and a bridge going across a stream, and it's coming together, and you never hear about stuff like that. You never hear about the, uh, archaeological expeditions that are just, amazing in what they're accomplishing now. Dealing with the natural world and purposes, helping human beings, you know? How can that be? How do you wrap your mind around that context? It's because people treat them nice, and so they return the thing. It happens in the animal kingdom, you know? And elephants in particular, I mean, if you cross an elephant, they'll tell you.
That's for sure. And they don't forget, right? They have
That's
long
right.
memories.
And the same happens with bears. I mean, you consider bears will live with you for just fine, in a place like that. But if you get too close or something, you're next to the cubs, you're gonna die.
Absolutely.
So you just have to be aware. You have to think from outside the box. Put your place in the animal of the squirrel and the birds, the flowers. You sort of live your life differently when you look at it from outside the box. You see everything collectively. It's one big
Indeed.
system.
Indeed. Charles, in writing the book, was it liberating to write it and put it down in black and white, or was it a challenge for you?
All those epiphanies didn't come from forethought. All those concepts were not forethought. I would just wake up in the morning and say, "That's a powerful thing. What's the difference between um, faith and science?" Well, I came up with a concept. It was tangibility. Science trumps faith because it's tangible. You can measure it. You can't measure God, so it doesn't exist. But when you sit there and look at the intangible laws, there's intangible laws. There's the laws of love. If you go to a sentient species, any place in the universe, this is from science fiction, any place in the universe, they will know what love is, what truth is, what honor is, what justice is. They might not have the same words, they might not apply it the same way, but they will know. Those are the laws of intangibility. And there are laws of intangibility. They carry across all the societies on the planet Earth, and we will carry that knowledge to space, and we will have a successful connection if that's even scientifically possible because of those laws of intangibility being more powerful and original before the laws of science. We were talking about what happens before we were born, what happens after we die before we started making moccasins. That's the fundamental
Gotcha.
base. The science is based upon the knowledge that we created by having civilization and putting it all together. That's where science came from.
Intriguing. Intriguing. What do you say, Charles, to a viewer who's saying to themselves, That sounds like a great idea. Where do I start? How do I start to think outside the box?
You have to realize at a very fundamental soul level that whatever is perfect. There are no mistakes. There are no mistakes. There are no mistakes. You have to realize there's no mistakes. And so when something bad something bad happens to me. I went over the handlebars on my motorcycle, for instance. I walked away. Okay. The the conflict with the motorcycle was pretty traumatic, right? But I could accept it. I didn't panic. I didn't, "Oh, no, I've crashed off my motorcycle. Call an ambulance," type of thing, you know? I just dealt with it because I'd survived. That was a bad decision, you know? And so, you know, and
Don't do
so
that again.
how do I fix it? So I go my life about fixing bad things. That's what I do. I fix bad things. And so when you go through life fixing bad things, whether it's financial, social, personal, whatever, you have a better thing. And when something bad happens, you know, you put a nail in a board and it bends over and knocks a hole in the plaster and stuff like that. Well, dang, you know, guess I'll put in a piece of sheetrock up, you know. So you
Uh,
accept you
there's
accept the
always a
bad in your
recovery.
life, whether it's a
There's always a
motorcycle.
recovery.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so it's a really important thing, and I get a lot of solace out of that. And if I could share the solace I get with people for them to fundamentally realize the nature of perfection, that everything is perfect. God makes no mistakes. He gives us the ability to choose. We can choose the action we take, and sometimes they don't work out very good. That's not his fault. That's the blessing he's given us, you know? We are blessed with the ability to make bad choices because we learn from them, you know?
Free will.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's the message of the book. I don't say all of that in particular, but then when somebody reads the book, that's what I want them to get from it. And I don't expect the book to be read all at one time because it is dense. I can't even read the book all at one time. You'd read it one chapter at a time. They're sort of organized in a logical sense, but you could start at the end of the book and go to the first if you want. You know, you just have to read the forward of the book. Whatever is perfect. There are no mistakes. What is the nature of that?
Interesting. And do you think what holds people back most is like a mental barrier? Is it in our minds, Charles, that we stick inside a box and we may not even realize that we're in a box?
That's exactly it. That's exactly right. Just think before you're born, we also think that your life starts when you're born. No, your life starts when you're um, conceived, you know, and a baby inside a womb hears daddy praying in a candlelit room, or he hears daddy drinking beer and yelling loud. Okay. He hears mommy talking to maids, or mommy, well, somebody else fixes the meal, and he lives it, and and mommy's living in comfort, fully pleased. Everything it's fundamental. It just starts before you're born. It starts, and so by the time you're born into a house that has a candlelight and a praying father and mother, or you live in a room with lanterns and everything else, with all kinds of material wealth and everything else, you know, that frames who you are. And the faith comes into that very strongly then. Are you Christian? Are you Buddhist? Or what are you? You know, that's where your foundation is. You can't argue with that. The basis of Buddhism is that whatever is perfect, you know, I mean, that's a basis of Buddhism. You sit there, that's your karma. You are by karma are supposed to be a rice peddler, you know, a rice paddy merchant. That's the way you were born in your mud wattle house, you know, and they would feel uncomfortable going there. I was stationed in Chuncheon, Korea when I was over there. Chuncheon, Korea, the camp page where I was eliminated. It's been turned into a high-speed transit. It used to take me a half day to ride from Chuncheon down to Seoul, and that's what I did. I had to learn Korean stuff like that. And now you can do it in half an hour or something like that. It zips at the tunnel. It
Wow.
goes straight between Chuncheon and Seoul, through tunnels, over rivers, all the way to Seoul. It's
Wow.
amazing. It just in the last 50 years, you know, I mean, it's just amazing the changes that are going on. And all the rice paddies
Absolutely.
that were around Chinchon are gone. They're all now suburbs of stucco houses.
Wow.
Wow is right.
So it's kind of a dichotomy, the best of the modern world and in some ways the
Yeah.
most challenges. As you look at 2026, do you think outside the box thinking is more important today than ever before?
I think it than ever before. I wouldn't say than ever before. It just wasn't acknowledged before, but I think it's
Mhm,
important
mhm.
to have it acknowledged now because I'm 79 years old. I might not write book two and book three. Notes from far inside the box. It's about the nature of thinking. You know, mind. How does mind separate from science and faith? Scientists don't even know that. But how do you think about it? How do you guys? And then that last one is notes from far outside the box and that's based upon a thing. What does the universe look like from outside? Think about that for a minute.
Interesting.
What does the whole universe look like from outside? We think that the universe is everything, right? Well, take a step out. Scientists can't do that. They can't even see what this core of the universe looks like. You know, but if you take your the mindset and you think about go from a place of perfection and you look at the universe from outside, you see a whole different nature of the nature of perfection. Galaxies exploding are normal. Galaxies running into everybody, one another, are normal. We're running into, I forget, Sagittarius, I think it is now. We're racing towards us. And I was thinking about, boy, that's going to be catastrophic. But the stars in the galaxy, they're so far apart, they won't even interact. The black galaxies will come together. The cores will not meet one another. They will just go by, and the planets be all tall up. Other than that, it won't be it'll be happening such a on a human thing, it happens so slow, we'll just see more excitement in the sky.
Indeed. Indeed.
So that's what thinking outside the box is. Another thing is, our nature of scale, you know, I was down at the Grand Canyon one time, and I was looking down at I said, "How come I can't see all the boats on the river down there?" He said, "Well, you're, 5,000 feet up in the air, a mile up in the air." To give you perspective, if the Empire State Building at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, it would only be halfway up. You could stack the Grand Canyon, the thing. And I remember being on the Empire State, we're looking down at the little tiny ants of people on the ground from the platform. I said, "Yeah, that makes sense. With two things, you would not see anything on the ground from the top of the rim there. And you want to walk down there? Okay." You know,
Good luck,
I'll
right?
drive. I'll drive down, take a boat up the canyon. You know. But that's a
It
nature.
reminds me of, when the astronauts looked back at the blue marble
Yes,
Earth and
that
thought to
was one of my
themselves,
epiphanies.
all of human history happening on that beautiful blue ball in the sky. And you're taking it to another level outside the whole universe. It's, not
Well
just
well,
looking back at Earth,
there
but
was
looking at the entire universe.
that's right, and that's what that astronaut looked at, and he says, "The most amazing thing, I didn't see any lines." That was an epiphany of mine. There was no lines separating the planet. The planet was one whole globe with land masses, forests, and water.
And all the lines are man-made.
That's it, and that's all that divisiveness is man-made. And that's just divisiveness, you know?
Interesting,
And some
interesting.
people have the right to kill other people because of that. Think of the Crusades. I grew up thinking the Crusades was one thing with King Arthur, you know? There was 10 crusades to the 10 crusades over thousands of years. I still can't wrap my brain around that, you know? 10
Amazing.
crusades? One crusade was terrible. 10? Jeez
Exactly.
Louise.
We are all our worst enemy, right?
That's right, we are. Our ego makes us our worst enemy. We're better than everybody else. Our way of looking at it better than well, why don't we look at it from outside the box and see we're not better, we're just different, you know?
We're all people.
That's right.
What kind of feedback have you gotten about the book, Charles? Have it been, people who are perhaps, think it's too involved for them to understand? Or
Too
have there been
too
people that say
dense. Too dense. I
too
have my
dense?
family,
Okay.
I gave all my family books, they haven't read it.
Oh.
My family hasn't read my books. I have sold 3 books since I published the book, and I bought all 3 of them and sent it to my son who was in prison. And so, because I couldn't buy them and mail them a book. They'd because drugs would be mailed. So they'd have to be delivered from the publisher, you know? So I bought the book and
Gotcha.
sent them to the publisher and to him and to some of his other cellmates, you know, stuff like that. I
Well,
don't
I'm
think they read it
confident that
either.
after folks become aware of the book, hopefully we'll up that figure of sales for you.
Well, the thing is, I'm non-social, you know, I'm an author because I'm not social. I can't deal socially. Um, when I was in construction and in the army too, I would go, but in construction, I would go out on a job and I'd handle this job, then I'd handle a second job. And by the time I got to the third job, I would remember very much about it because I was too confused with the other two jobs. But if you sent me out a job where I had one job to do, I could ace it. I was in high demand because of my attention to details. And that's what I do. See, you look around me right now, I have a million details right now, and I'm crazy with all the details I have because I can only focus on one thing at a time. So then that's where the epiphanies come from. See, if I'm not focusing on anything, they come from my subliminal mind. I have an eidetic memory. I can tell you what my floor plan looked like when I was 2 years old. Um, but that so that's the way my brain works. I recognize that, so I don't worry about the mess. I say, "Okay, I'll take care of this, I'll take care of this, I'll take care of this," and it just stays more and more complicated, so but I do take your complete stuff once in a while. I got the books, I got that done. Yay for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I
Did
understand that
did,
because,
writing the book change you in any way, Charles?
um not significantly, no.
Okay.
It was a big winner for me personally to write that stuff down, and I got a feeling of accomplishment that it was an important work. Um, to give you a concept about where I came from when I wrote the book. I read a book by Antonio Portia. He was a cobbler down in, Buenos Aires. And, some publisher went in and saw this old man sitting on his bench with a candle and drinking a sip of wine, and he was scribbling notes, looking at the people in the barn, scribbling notes and stuff like that. Uh, he said, "Well, what are you writing?" He says, "Here, take a look." And he was writing notes from the people, what the people were saying. Some, and one of the things I remember is, I know what I have given you. I don't know what you received." And there was a whole book of epiphanies like that. And I says, "That's what I have to do." That was a source with him. All it takes is the light of one small candle to banish the darkness. So this guy just wrote these things down. The publisher took it, published it, translated into a number of languages. The guy, I don't think ever got anything from it. He was all the way across the ocean from Europe. But the power of that book was amazing. I didn't understand all of them, but all of them, they were done in Portuguese, and all of them are translated into English, so the translation cuts them. But the ones that were there, those are the two I remember, and I've given away all those books, and they're gone now. Antonio Portia,
Wow.
Voices by Antonio Portia. That was a moment for me, and that's why I wrote my book, was because I had voices. I had a voice that I wanted to express about the nature of humanity, looking at it from
Indeed.
outside the box.
Indeed. Charles, unfortunately, our time is running down, but before I let you go, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our viewers today about either the book or the entire concept of thinking outside the box?
I can't emphasize enough how important it is for humanity to look outside the box, and there's going to be the 10% that are always fighting that because they want to rule the box. And I hate the media. They're brainwashers.
You think it's part of the problem these days more than any kind of
Currently, yeah,
solution?
not in the past. I mean, in the past they were beneficial, but now they've just gotten this thing of being as aggravating as possible. Making as much problem as possible of the smallest things. They're talking about gay rights when we have the 23 trillion or $32 trillion debt, and we're talking about gay rights. Let's fix the debt, you know, fix the debt. Then we could take care of the rest of the stuff. We can't take care of all that stuff. Like illegal
No
immigrants. How
shortage
does
of
that even a
challenges.
process? So that's what I want to get. Let's look outside the box at this and realize where the BS is.
Charles, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Again, we've been speaking with Charles Cottom. The name of the book is Notes from Outside the Box, and I assume it's available on Amazon and everywhere fine books are sold.
Yes.
Excellent. Charles, thanks so much for being with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.